Hey everyone, this is Justin, and this is a review / demo of this PDP by DW Platinum Series Solid Snare Drum. I couldn't find very much information about this particular drum online, so I'm hoping that this video will help you out in case you're thinking about picking one of these up. I'm going to give you a little bit of information first about the drum and some of my impressions of it, and then later on I'm going to play the drum so you can hear for yourself how it sounds. This is a 14 by 5 inch steam bent North American maple shell, single ply. It's about a 1/4 inch ply, and I've been told by a rep at DW that only around 100 of these were made, which if that is indeed the case, that's pretty cool. But I should also mention that this drum is not really related in any way to the DW Super Solid Snare, which is a completely different drum, completely different manufacturing process, and so they're not really related, aside from the fact that they're both solid snares. But DW has a video called The Super Solid Story with John Good, and it's very interesting, and I recommend you check it out. So as I mentioned before, this is a solid snare drum, meaning it's a 1-ply steam bent drum. And you can see right here in the shell, if you look at the grains, it's a true 1-ply solid shell drum. One thing to notice is that this drum doesn't have reinforcing hoops installed, which I'm not an expert on the subject, but I've read in various places that solid drums are supposed to have reinforcing hoops. But this one doesn't. So as you can see, I went with the Black Oyster finish ply finish, which is one of their discontinued finishes. Of course, PDP for 2010 pared down their Platinum Series finishes from around 30 to only 4. And now it's 2011 and we're still waiting to see what's going to happen, if anything, with the Platinum Series for finishes. But one of the main reasons I decided to go with the Black Oyster finish is because it's pretty neutral. So I'd be very interested in hearing what other drummers have to say about this, but I decided to go with a neutral finish as opposed to, for example, the red drum, which would, with the forest green set you see in my other videos, which would look like a Christmas tree, and that would be a little bit ridiculous. So I was hoping to keep it neutral, and also in case I decide to change drum sets, if I bought something that was too matchy and then it wouldn't look good if I changed drum sets and wanted to keep the snare. So I'd be very interested to hear what other drummers have to say about that. The Black Oyster finish looks great in person. The sparkles really capture the light in a very flattering way, and video and photo doesn't really do justice to this finish. It also has a little bit of a textured feel, which kind of makes it look like the sparkle part is bursting out of the regular black part. So that's pretty cool. And you can see why this particular finish is in such high demand. This drum comes with DW's standard heads on batter side and snare side. The snare side is standard snare weight, and the batter side is about an ambassador weight, maybe a little thinner. They don't seem to be bad heads, but I'm very interested in hearing what it sounds like with a little better heads on it. For example, maybe a Power Stroke 3 or an Aquarian coated with the power dot on the batter side. The snares seem to be some generic, no-name, standard steel snares. They're definitely not the DW True Tone snares. And they're not bad snares, but like the heads, I'm very interested in hearing how this drum sounds with, for example, some True Tone snares put on. This drum features a drop-style throw-off for the snares, and it has a couple interesting features I'd like to point out. So one is that there's a little rubber grommet on the handle part of the throw-off so that it reduces the sound made when the snares are pulled into position. So this could be useful, for example, in the studio. If you need to throw your snares on or throw them off in the middle of a song, this will eliminate a little bit of the noise made by the throw-off assembly. Of course, the snares will still sound depending on how your snares are adjusted, but you don't have to worry about the hardware itself making any noise. The other interesting thing is the snare tension adjustment dial has a drum key head on top, which is interesting for me. I've never seen anything like this, and I've never been in a position to where I'd want my snares so tight that I couldn't tension it by hand. And that I would need a drum key to get it that tight. But I suppose this must be useful in certain situations. Maybe if you're a drummer and you have a nerve injury or something, and you have trouble grasping things, then you could tension it with a drum key. Or maybe just if you're tuning your drum and you want to adjust your snare tension at the same time, sort of in harmony with the tuning of the drum, the tuning of the batter head, and then the snare tension to sort of get them in harmony with one another. Then you could tension your snares with the drum key without having to put the drum key down. So you would go from tuning lug to tuning lug with the drum key, and then not have to put the drum key down to use your hand to tension the snares. So that could be one advantage. One small detail I'd like to point out is that in between the tuning lugs and the shell on my Platinum Series drum set, the satin oil one, there are little rubber gaskets which sit between the shell and the lug. And I don't know if it's because this is a finish ply drum or if it's because it's a solid shell drum or whatever, but this one doesn't have those rubber gaskets between the lugs and the shell. There are a few small details with this drum which were a little bit disappointing. Overall, the Platinum Series seems to have a little bit of a lack of finish. For example, on this snare and on my Platinum Series set, all of the hardware, which holds, for example, the tension lugs to the shell and the badge to the shell, that was all loose, and I had to tighten it up by hand. That's not the end of the world, but you wouldn't expect to have to deal with that on a semi-pro level drum set. Also, between the tension rods and the hoops, there are supposed to be these nylon washers, and a few of those were missing. Like I said, it's not a deal breaker because I can pick those up at the local music store for next to nothing, but it's something I shouldn't really have to deal with on a brand new drum. For the most part, I'm happy with this drum. It has a good crack, and it has a pretty decent body, which comes through, especially when it's mic'd. It definitely has more character for my ear than my other snare, which is a Tama Metalworks, which is also a nice snare, but this one has a little bit more feeling to it, more character.